Ever watch the scene where Aang finds Gyatso's body? It's one of the quietest moments in the whole show. Aang floats into the ruins of the Southern Air Temple, and there is his teacher, the warmest man he knew, the one who hid cakes in his robes and broke temple rules so Aang could keep Appa, the man who taught through patience and laughter and never once raised his voice. He's lying in the rubble, surrounded by the bodies of dozens of Fire Nation soldiers who should have been nearly impossible to kill, and Gyatso had killed all of them, alone, with his last breath. The show moves past this moment quickly, but if you sit with it for a second, it tells you something important. The Air Nomads were not pacifists because they lacked the ability to fight. They were pacifists because they chose to be. The strength was always there. They had simply decided not to use it. So here's the question for today. What if they had decided differently? What if, somewhere in the 30 years before Sozin's comet, someone looked at what was coming and decided that knowing how to fight and choosing not to were two very different things, and that maybe it was time to remember the difference? Let's find out. But before that, there is something I have always been wondering about Aang, and I think it's time we address it. So, in the legendary fight between Momo and Appa, who ended up winning? Aang's reply? Well, once you download Polybuzz yourself, you can ask him and find out. You see, with this new free app called Polybuzz AI, you can talk with your favorite anime and fictional characters and have all sorts of discussions with them as if they were actually your best friends. Whether Aang, Toph, Goku, Gojo, Naruto, Luffy, or even your favorite waifus like Nami, Robin, Speedwagon, Hinata, and many more. Polybuzz makes your wildest dreams a reality. And what can you talk about with them? Anything. And I mean anything. Free, enjoyable, and the best part, as an anime fan, you will never get bored of it, as the selection of anime characters they have is honestly endless. Use code DOMAIN88 to get access to 3 days premium membership completely free of charge. Use my link in the description down below to download Polybuzz AI and start chatting with your favorite anime and fictional characters today. Believe me, you will not regret it. But now, let's get back to our video. The first thing to understand is that the Air Nomads did not always believe in total nonviolence. It was a doctrine chosen and taught across generations as something close to sacred. But before that doctrine existed, there were warrior monks. The oldest texts in the temple archives called them the Thoset. They had defended the high places long before the philosophy of peace took hold. Those scrolls were still in the archives, sealed but present. 30 years before Sozin's comet, a senior monk at the Southern Air Temple named Tashi receives intelligence from a White Lotus contact about Fire Nation troop movements near the mountain passes. The message never reaches Avatar Roku, but it reaches Tashi, and Tashi has been watching the Fire Nation expand for 2 decades. He calls a private council. Most of the monks refuse him. The philosophy is clear. Nonviolence is not a tactic, it's a truth. One elder makes the sharpest argument against Tashi. He says that a person who learns to kill is changed by the learning, regardless of what they choose to do afterward. That argument is not wrong. History tends to support it. But Tashi's response is simple. The pacifism was a choice made deliberately by their ancestors, which means it is a choice the current generation can revisit without betraying who they are. He's not asking them to go to war. He is asking them to remember what their element can actually do, so that if the worst comes, they are not helpless. The vote barely passes. Tashi opens the sealed archives and retrieves the Thoset scrolls. Among the young monks who begin training in the old forms over the following years is one who will become the most gifted combat airbender of his generation. Warm, funny, patient, beloved by everyone who knows him. His name is Gyatso. He trains for 30 years alongside his regular duties. He learns the old techniques, refines them, and tells almost no one. To the outside world, the Air Nomads remain exactly what they have always appeared to be: spiritual, peaceful, and free. The knowledge stays buried, but that's only until the infamous night of Sozin's comet. Air Nomad scouts on Sky Bison spot the Fire Nation fleet building at the base of the mountain ranges surrounding all 4 temples. Ravens go out to each temple. The Southern Temple gets the message with enough time, but they were the luckiest ones. The Eastern Temple missive is late to reach the Eastern Temple, while the Northern Temple gets it hours before the assault. And the Western Temple ends up with a worst-case scenario. It's too late for the message to reach them. With the Southern Temple being the only ones to receive the warning in time, they start preparing to fend off the assault immediately. When the Fire Nation fleet rises over the ridge at dawn, engines burning comet bright. The temple looks completely empty. The fleet commanders believe that the monks have already fled. However, in the exact moment they let their guards down, roughly 1,000 airbenders rise from the north, above the cloud line, directly into the morning sun. Fire Nation warships are built to project force downward at ground-level targets. They have no real defense against something coming from directly above. The Airbenders' ambush is working. Gyatso goes for the engines first. He has spent nearly 30 years thinking about this exact problem, and he understands that the ship's mobility is their real power. He collapses 3 engine compartments in the first pass, and those ships drift. They become obstacles for the vessels behind them, and the formation falls apart. Other masters coordinate to generate the tornadic vortices that the old scrolls describe. 2 ships go down in the first 10 minutes. And then there is the technique that the Fire Nation has no answer for, because nobody had ever thought to prepare for it. Airbending at its most precise can reach into a closed space and pull the breathable air out of it. A sealed warship compartment is a closed space. The Airbenders do not need to breach the hull. They don't even need to touch the soldiers inside. They simply touch the air and the compartment goes quiet. Faced with the most impossible scenario, the Fire Nation is forced to retreat by midday. While the Southern Air Temple has won the battle, this is not the end of the war. Sozin sends triple the forces the following morning, and the comet still burns. And this time, the Fire Nation commanders spread wide and come from multiple directions. The Airbenders fight with everything the Thoset scrolls gave them, and everything 60 years of spiritual training built into them. They are extraordinary, but it still isn't enough. The Fire Nation's power is simply overwhelming, and the temple eventually falls. Still, this was not before roughly 800 people escaped across all 4 temples combined. They slip over ridges on sky bison in small groups, moving fast and high, disappearing into the mountain passes before the second wave can cut them off. 800 people, where there had been thousands. 3 temples burned to the ground. 1 civilization shattered in 2 days. And everybody who escaped did so because of Gyatso, who was standing at the gate of the southern temple. Gyatso had made his decision sometime in the night between the first retreat and the second assault. He looked at the sky bison lined up, and he looked at the gate, and he chose the gate. Not because he had no other option, but because the gate needed someone who had spent 30 years preparing for exactly this. And he was that person, and giving those sky bison 10 more minutes mattered more to him than anything else. His bending in those final hours is unlike anything the soldiers facing him have ever encountered. It's not desperate, and it's not furious. It is quiet. 60 years of spiritual practice, anchored to 30 years of combat training, produces something that looks almost calm from the outside. He treats the comet-powered soldiers in front of him as a problem to be solved, one at a time, with total patience. Eventually, Gyatso is overwhelmed, and he dies at the gate, surrounded by the soldiers he killed. Having chosen to be there till the end, he was free in his own way. At the other temples, the outcomes are painful and varied. The Eastern Temple nuns use the canyon terrain below the buildings with real skill, and nearly half of them escape into the rock networks before the assault overwhelms the structures above. The Northern Temple falls fast, but a handful of young monks get out on a single sky bison, including a child of 10, whose name the story does not need to record to matter. The Western Temple had no warning at all, but the monks there had trained the longest, and they destroyed 2 full Fire Nation battalions before being overwhelmed. A small group escapes north, and these are the ones who will, over the next 100 years, become the Storm Monks. And Aang is not there for any of it. Like the canon story, Aang will remain frozen for the next 100 years. Meanwhile, the 800 survivors scattered across 4 continents are communicating through sky bison relays and White Lotus contacts, and the slow and dangerous work of finding each other without being found by anyone else. Over the following decades, that number drops due to attrition, raids, and disease. They're being hunted constantly by the world that has decided on their fate. By the time Aang wakes up, roughly 300 people remain as active members of what was once a civilization of thousands. And among those 300, there is a split. In the first decade after the genocide, survival is the only ideology anybody has space for. A woman named Sola, one of Tashi's most trusted students, holds the scattered groups together. She argues that what made the Air Nomads who they are is not the temples or the robes. It is the practice of meditation and the philosophy, the long tradition of being present in the world rather than dominant over it. If that goes, she says, the Fire Nation wins even if every survivor lives to old age. Her position holds for a generation. The monks who follow her become known as the Kite Monks, named for the way they move through danger, carefully, reading currents, never burning more than they have. They maintain the traditional forms and the old songs. They meditate. They use violence only when forced to it, and they mourn it afterward every time. Because their spiritual practice stays intact, their bending remains extraordinary. The precision of a kite monk at full capacity is something the other faction will never quite match, because airbending draws on a centered awareness that you cannot maintain if you stop centering yourself. The other faction grows from the survivors of the Western Temple's escape, the monks who had been fighting the longest and had buried the most people, and had, somewhere across years of that, used up whatever reserve of grief they carried and arrived somewhere quieter and more permanent confident on the other side. Their leader is a man named Bato. He was 15 years old when the comet came. He has been fighting since the day after. He's not cruel and he's not reckless. He is precise and experienced, and he reached a conclusion a long time ago that he no longer presents as a philosophy, that the only tool that ever actually worked was the one they spent decades pretending they did not have, and that sentiment about it is a luxury for people with intact temples. The Storm Monks have become the most effective guerrilla force the world has ever produced. Mobile, invisible, and able to operate at altitudes where no ground force can follow. Their early campaigns are genuinely righteous. Supply convoys destroyed, Earth Kingdom prisoners freed, Fire Nation mountain passes collapsed. The Order of the White Lotus works with them carefully, but over decades, the targets expand. Earth Kingdom infrastructure starts appearing in their operations. A road that moves troops, but also connects villages. A granary that feeds a garrison, but also feeds a town. The cost is borne by people who were not consulted. And several Storm Monks begin showing visible signs of bending deterioration. Erratic technique, loss of precision, emotional breaks during combat. Airbending requires a centered awareness, and the Storm Monks had stopped centering anything except the next operation. The practice maintains the precision. Without it, the edges fray slowly, in ways that are easy to dismiss, until they're not. Bato flies this under acceptable cost. Meanwhile, the Fire Nation spends 100 years building a different history. By the time the war reaches its final decades, Fire Nation children learn that the Air Nomads launched an unprovoked aerial assault on peacekeepers, that Sozin responded with measurable force, and that the surviving Sky Terrorists, as the propaganda calls them, are proof that the original operation was never completed. This is a lie built so carefully over so long that the generation raised on it does not experience it as a lie. It simply feels like history. As for the world outside the Fire Nation, most people know something is out there hitting supply lines, probably Airbenders, probably a handful of desperate survivors operating alone. The Fire Nation reclassifies every confirmed sighting as Sky Bandit activity. The Storm Monks strike at night. The Kite Monks never reveal population numbers or camp locations even to allies. The White Lotus knows they exist, but not how many or where. The world suspects a few survivors. Nobody suspects 300 people, multi-generational, organized, and still practicing. Katara breaks the ice because she's always broken things that needed breaking. She finds the sphere, frees what is inside, and what comes out is a 12-year-old airbender who has been asleep for 100 years and who is, in the first moments of waking, completely himself. Curious, warm, immediately delighted by everything around him. Then, she tells him how long he has been gone, about the war, and eventually, she tells him something that has no equivalent in the original story. Some of his people are still alive. What moves across Aang's face in that moment does not fit neatly into any category a 12-year-old has available. It's not relief, and it's not grief, and it's not joy, though it contains pieces of all three. What it mostly is, once it settles, is weight. Aang wasn't present when his people were brutalized, and Gyatso had to bear the weight all alone. On top of that, he was still gone for 100 years, while people who survived a genocide lived through every minute of that century without him. Some of them made it, but they made it without the Avatar, and lived without any real hope, which is its own kind of wound. On the other hand, Zuko gets a different briefing before he leaves the Fire Nation. He knows about the Avatar, as he always has. He is also told about the Air Nomad remnants. The official position is Sky Terrorists. The briefing materials describe their operations with a precision that suggests real intelligence gathering. He's not asked to eliminate them directly, but he is told that capturing the Avatar may draw them out, and that any information on their locations would be useful to finishing what Sozin started. Zuko carries this the way he carries everything his father gives him, with the certainty that doing it well is the only path back to where he belongs. He's not examining it closely. That kind of examination happens at night, alone in fragments. Iroh knows more than he says. He has learned, over decades, when to let things sit. The Kite Monks intercept the group mid-air, which is now how almost all Air Nomad contact works. Not from below, from above, appearing out of the sky without warning, on Sky Bison wearing earth-colored robes with faded tattoos, circling Appa at a distance that is careful but not hostile. Their leader is a woman in her 40s named Lenny. She was 8 years old on the night the comet came. She was one of those Sky Bison that went over the ridge in the dark, and she knew even then, from the sounds behind her, that someone at the gate was buying her the minutes she was using. When she recognizes Aang, something moves through her expression and is immediately controlled. She has learned to be careful with hope. It's a skill you develop when hope has cost you enough times. She does not have a warm reunion with him in the way the word usually means. The specific feeling of survivors finding each other on the other side of something enormous, careful and real, and not easy at all. She shows him what the Kite Monks have built in a century of hiding. Mountain camps, preserved scrolls, children learning airbending forms in spaces that appear on no map. It's heartbreaking and it's beautiful. Aang cries more than once, and neither Katara or Poor Sokka tries to fill those silences because there are no words that are not smaller than what they would be interrupting. Lenny warns him before they part. There are others, and the others will not receive him the way she has. The Storm Monks arrive that night. No announcement, no lights. They are simply there, which is itself a demonstration of what 100 years being hunted teaches you. Bato is perhaps 60. He moves with the economy of someone who has not wasted anything in a long time. He looks at Aang the way you look at new information before you have decided what it means. Beside him is a 16-year-old named Kaya. She was born in a Storm Monk camp. She learned to airbend before she learned to read. She's used her bending in ways the pre-war monks would not have been able to imagine. She looks at Aang with an expression that is not hostile and not warm. She's trying to determine if he's real. The Avatar has been a word her entire life, attached to an absence. And here is that absence standing in front of her, wearing a face that was never actually there. Bato does not present his position as philosophy. He finished thinking in those terms a long time ago. He states it plainly. The approach the Air Nomads inherited failed to protect them at the most important moment in their history, and he spent 60 years building a different approach. And the Avatar's return is useful, but does not change the calculation he has already made. Aang listens to all of this. He looks at Kaya, at the burns on her hands, at the hollow alertness in her face that belongs to people who have spent their whole lives in danger and never fully lose it even when the danger is temporarily absent. He understands, looking at her, that the world he has woken into is not a story with two neat sides. It's a world of people who were all damaged by the same original damage and became different things in response to it. He asks Kaya to teach him what the Storm Monks developed. She teaches him the Air Blade, the concussive burst, the technique that reaches into a closed space and removes the breathable air from inside of it. He learns everything faster than anyone she has taught before because his spiritual foundation gives him the precision the Storm Monks themselves, for all their experience, never fully recovered. Within days, he is significantly better at their own techniques than most of them are. The first time he practices the suffocation technique on a training dummy, he stops when it's over. He sits down on the ground and is quiet for a long time. Katara sees him sit and comes over. She sits close to him without touching. Neither of them speaks. After a while, he gets up and they continue. He never uses the technique on a person, not once, across everything that follows, but he knows exactly what he's choosing against every time he makes a different decision. That is new. That changes the weight of the choice. Before he leaves the Kite Monk camp, Lenny shows him something from the oldest texts that they rescued from the temples. Scrolls that predate the pacifist doctrine entirely, from the era of the Thoset. Most of the records are tactical, but one fragment describes a concept the ancient monks called severing the flame, not killing a firebender, not overpowering them, removing the fire itself at the source, separating a bender from their bending permanently. Nobody has achieved it in living memory. The Kite Monks treat it as mythology. Lenny shows it to Aang without much comment, just as part of her archive. Aang reads it twice and flies away. The assault on the Northern Water Tribe is, in its broad shape, the same disaster it has always been. Admiral Zhao brings a navy that understands only one direction of force and has never encountered anything it cannot overwhelm with firepower and numbers. What is different is what comes from the sky. The Kite Monks arrive with advanced coordination, their roles discussed and agreed upon with Master Pakku and the Water Tribe's senior commanders. They integrate into the Northern defense in a way that produces results neither side could have managed alone. The Kite Monks are exceptional tactical thinkers, and they fly patterns the Fire Navy has never seen and has no prepared response to. The Storm Monks do not coordinate with anyone. They appear when the battle is at its worst, and they hit the Fire Navy targets with a ruthlessness that stops the assault cold. 3 warships go down in a single engagement, using methods that the Water Tribe soldiers watching from the walls find as unsettling as they find effective. The soldiers on those ships do not die from fire or water or any force the Watchers can identify clearly. The Water Tribe commanders do not press for specifics. The siege breaks. The city holds. But afterward, one of the senior Water Tribe commanders stands on the wall and watches a Storm Monk land nearby and says nothing because the question he is thinking of does not have a comfortable answer, and he knows it. Pakku hears the silence and does not fill it. Zuko's role in keeping Aang alive during the siege stays the same because some things are structural to the story, and this is one of them. But he leaves the siege with an image he cannot immediately categorize. A Storm Monk, young, not much older than him, landing on that wall after doing something the briefing materials had described as terrorism. He does not have a framework for what he just saw. He files it away where he files everything he does not yet know what to do with. Ba Sing Se has always been a city theory that converted its denial of the war into architecture and then called the arrangement civilization. Long Feng runs the denial the way a craftsman runs a workshop, with real skill and complete indifference to what the product is actually for. What is different here is what Long Feng has been quietly managing for the past 20 years. He discovered through careful intelligence work that the kite monks move through Earth Kingdom territory on routes near the city. He made contact. He offered the kite monks something they needed: a legal blind eye, the ability to pass through Earth Kingdom land without being turned over to Fire Nation operatives. In exchange, he got something he valued more: a quiet but real restraint on store monk operations near Ba Sing Se's political infrastructure. And to ensure compliance with that arrangement, Long Feng had kept one of their people. Just one, and quietly, Lenny. When Aang finds out, he goes alone. He does not tell Long Feng or the Dai Li or anyone with an institutional reason to stop him. Aang moves the way the kite monks taught him, through the gap between one guard's attention and the next, through spaces that were not built to contain someone who understands air the way he does. He finds the cell and spends an hour on the locks. Dai Li locks are earth-bent and layered and designed to resist the approaches of people who solve problems through force. He finds every mechanism, every hidden latch, and undoes them one at a time with the most careful and precise airbending he's ever used. He does not crack a wall. Aang does not knock anyone out. He could have taken the wall down. After all, the kite monks have watched him work, and they know what he's capable of. Aang chooses the hour on the locks, and when the last latch releases and the door opens, Lenny steps out. She looks at him for a moment with an expression he cannot quite read. Then she walks out without a word, and he steps back and lets her, and they leave together through the same quiet path he came in. Zuko, in the hills outside the city, gets captured by Kaya. She's very good at this. She's done it before, and she has her reasons ready for what comes next. Then he asks her how old she was the first time she used the technique she's using now. She tells him. He says that should not have happened to her. No performance in it, no tactic. Just a statement of a fact that he can read in her face, because he carries a version of the same thing in his own. She lets him go. She cannot explain why for a long time, and when the understanding does come, it is not comfortable. Ba Sing Se falls, as it always does, through betrayal from inside. The specific vulnerability of a city that spent too long believing its own story. The Storm Monks' independent operations in the Earth Kingdom had, over years, eroded the goodwill that might have allowed faster coordination, and faster coordination might have caught the betrayal before it opened the walls. The city falls, and the reason it falls matters. Ozai's plan does not change. He will burn the Earth Kingdom from above under the comet, completely enough that what comes after could be called peace, because there will be nothing left with the capacity to resist. His timeline has accelerated because the Air Nomad remnants have become more of a problem than he projected, and he has learned from his intelligence network that a coalition between the Avatar, the surviving Air Nomads, and the other nations might produce something his fire cannot simply overwhelm. He needs to move before that coalition finishes forming. Bato also needs to move. The comet is coming. For the first time in a century, an Airbender strike force would hold the power advantage. The comet amplifies firebending, but airbending operates completely outside of it, and the entire Fire Nation military structure is built around the assumption of firebending superiority. A strike on the Fire Nation homeland, launched at comet peak, before the Fire Nation can concentrate its forces, could end the war in a single night. Bato has been thinking about this for 20 years. He has the people, he has the position, he has the Sky Bison. He gives Aang 3 days and assembles his force on a cliff face overlooking the mountain pass. Aang goes to him before he leaves, and he decides to go alone. He does not argue with Bato's history. He does not tell him violence is wrong. Bato has heard that sentence 10,000 times across 60 years, and it has not changed a single thing about what had to be done, so Aang does not say it. Instead, he acknowledges everything Bato is right about. The history is real, the losses are real, and the cost of the century is real and not abstract. And no one who did not live it can tell those who did that they have processed it incorrectly. Then Aang talks about Gyatso. He talks about a man who spent 30 years learning everything Bato knows, who studied the same scrolls, understood the same techniques, and made the same calculations about what a fully prepared airbender can do. A man who knew, going into that last night, exactly what he was capable of, and who chose the gate. Not because fighting back was wrong, because 800 people made it to those ridges because someone held the gate long enough. And those 800 became 300 active members. And those 300 include Bato and Kaya and the children in the mountain camps who have never seen a temple, but are still, in some essential way, what the Air Nomads are. Bato's response is simple and direct. Gyato's gift was 800 people out of thousands. The Fire Nation got 4 temples. Aang does not dispute this. Both things are true. He just asks for 3 days. And if 3 days pass and Aang has failed, he tells Bato plainly that he will not ask him to stop. That last part is the only thing Bato had not anticipated. It's not a plea, and it's not a trick. It was a real concession, and Bato recognized it as one. He says Aang has 3 days. Aang goes on to fight Ozai the way Aang fights Ozai, by surviving, by moving, by refusing to behave the way fire expects its targets to behave. The comet makes Ozai something close to unstoppable, and the fight is long and desperate. Multiple times, Aang has an opening that could end it. He has the tools. He learned them from Kaya. He knows exactly what the Hollow Wind would do to a man in an enclosed space, but he does not use them. During the fight, the answer from that ancient text surfaces in him the way answers sometimes do when the pressure's high enough and you've been carrying something for long enough. Severing the flame, the concept the oldest Air Nomad records described, and nobody had achieved in living memory. He reaches for it at the moment when there is nothing else left, and it meets something in him that has been building since the hour he spent on Lenny's locks, since the afternoon he sat down after the training dummy and said nothing, and since Gyatso's hand on Appa's side in the dark and the instruction to go north. He finds the ability. He uses it. He removes Ozai's firebending, not as a miracle, not as a loophole, as the thing the story had been pointing towards since Lenny showed him that fragment of the old text. The answer was always in the archive. It just needed someone who had already decided, for real, and not theoretically, what they were choosing not to do. Bato stands on the cliff. The comet lights everything orange. The Fire Nation homeland sits clear on the horizon. His strike force is assembled behind him, and they've been ready for this for decades. And the comet overhead gives them an advantage they never have had and will not have again. He watches the horizon for the signal, a column of white air, the kind only the Avatar produces at full capacity, visible from miles away if you know what to look for. And it comes, with time to spare. Bato stands there for a long time after it appears. Comet is still bright, the horizon is still clear. Nobody behind him speaks. Kaya exhales in a way that takes a long time. He turns his sky bison around. The others follow without being told, one by one, moving back the way they came, toward the mountain camps and the hidden valleys and the children who were asleep before the comet rose. He never says it was enough and goes home. The war ends the way wars end when the person at the center of them is removed, slowly at first, then all at once, then with a long silence that is harder than everything before it. Zuko becomes Fire Lord, and the work of remaking a nation built on a century of deliberate lies is the kind of work that takes a lifetime and still does not finish. He had sat across from Kaya on a hillside outside Ba Sing Se, and seen in her face the physical reality of what the Fire Nation made of the world, not as a political position, but as a fact present in the body of a 16-year-old girl who had never known anything else. Zuko carries that the way the people who will eventually be good at their jobs carry things, not as guilt, which turns inward and stops, but as obligation, which turns outward and keeps going. The Air Nomad remnants face what survivors always face when the external emergency is over: each other. The Storm Monks' wartime operations are on the record. Earth Kingdom communities have real grievances. Fire Nation soldiers who are not combatants in any meaningful sense died in operations that the Storm Monks planned and carried out. None of this gets made clean. Aang does not try to make it clean. He sits in the conversations that need to happen, listens more than he talks, and holds space for the complexity without pushing it towards a resolution that is simpler than what it actually is. Bato attends some of these conversations and refuses others. He does not apologize for the decisions he made. Apologizing for surviving is the one position he's never been willing to take. Aang does not force the question. The number of active Air Nomads at the end of the war is somewhere around 280. The rebuilding is slow and honest, and built on a foundation that is not the same as what was there before. You cannot rebuild what was there before. What you can do is build something that remembers it clearly. Kaya becomes Aang's first formal student. Teaching her is the most demanding thing he has done, not because of the techniques she still needs to refine, but because of the questions she asks. She does not accept answers that are cleaner than what she can see with her own eyes. She asks things he cannot answer quickly, and she looks at him when he reaches for a principle instead of a truth, in a way that reminds him, without her intending it, of Gyatso. One afternoon, months after the war ended, she asks him why he did not use what she taught him on Ozai. She knows he had the option. She taught him the option herself. She wants the actual reason, not the version that sounds good. He is quiet for a moment. He says he wanted to know that he could, and then, once he knew that, He wanted to know what it felt like to choose differently. She asks if it felt like anything. He thinks back to Gyatso at the gate. He thinks about Bato on the cliff, and he thinks about the hour on the locks. He thought about sitting on the ground after the training dummy while Katara sat next to him and said nothing, and it was a long time before he stood up again. He says it felt like being free. Kaya thinks about this for a moment, then she goes back to training. The Air Nation that exists at the end of the story is not the Air Nation that existed before the comet. It is something harder and more honest than that. A people who know exactly what their element can do, who carry that knowledge every day, and who choose, not from shelter or ignorance or the comfortable distance of never having been shown the alternative, to be something other than what the century tried to make them. Not innocent, awake. That is the harder thing, and it's the thing that lasts. Thanks for watching this video! Make sure you like and subscribe, and click on this video next for more great anime and Avatar content! Go on, check it out!